Well, hello, welcome everybody. I got John here with Showflo. Super excited for session three of our three-part rundown bootcamp series. So today's actually going to be about setting up your environment, talking about all things on site, features, functionality. I'm actually joined by JP today, who's going to be running through some of the features and also get a little sneak peek and into some of our in kind of our headquarters studio and all that. So I'm super pumped to see some of the backstage stuff. So yeah, and then as always, definitely shoot us some notes in the chat and Q&A section here. We're going to be answering those just throughout the whole session as always. This is being recorded, as well as all of our previous ones are being recorded or have been recorded. So definitely on our resources page on our website, you can go back, watch any of the previous ones. Covered a lot of really good topics. So yeah, what's up, JP? How you doing today?
Hey, Johnny. Doing all right. Excited to be doing the third session today, the last of this three-part series. And
Yeah.
to everyone who has been with us from the start and saw the first two, thank you so much. And we hope that they were helpful, as well as for today's session. Of course, on that first session, we covered a lot of what jumping back into Showflo might be feeling like, what kind of best practices might be when you're starting to build out that content. On that second session, we talked about starting to bring in other crew members and some of the functionality related to that. Today, we're going to be talking about those last few days before going live and up to going live itself. So a little bit of how you might want to set up your environment and what feature sets are going to be most relevant. Now, we do recognize that there are a lot of different roles in industries and types of events that use Showflo. But we're going to cover a little bit of everything today. But just to bring Johnny back and remind everyone, Johnny is going to be monitoring the chat. So please send your questions in, and he will be pitching them up to me or answering those questions himself. But yeah, really important. Send those questions in. We want this to be just your session. So anyways, Johnny, any last comments that I may have forgotten?
No, I think it's about covers it. Yeah, super pumped. I already see some people in the chat, so feel free to maybe mention where you're joining us from, and yeah, and send some questions our way. We'll be picking those and answer them throughout this whole session.
So, like I mentioned, lots of different roles, but we're actually going to start with this type of event and this type of role, and that is your presenter and how that presenter setup might be. So we have a behind the scenes camera set up so that you can see all of the hardware that we have in place here, right? So let me go over a few of these things. First, of course, is my laptop, and that is going to be where I do my demos. So my screen share that's going into Showflo Studio, that's all coming from this device right here. Now, beyond that, we have we have my downstage monitor kind of, and in it, I have the presenter view. The presenter view for this camera that is in Showflo Studio as well as a different user. I currently have it in the live view so that it can serve as a little bit of a confidence monitor, letting me know what is live right now. And of course, above that, we have the prompter setup itself. Now, some of your live presenter setups might be using the prompter screen for actual scripting, for reading that text directly off of the monitor. But in my case, I actually have it set up with my speaker notes. So it's just an outline. Now, all of this is going back to our control room, which I can see through this glass. So if the control room directors and the stream engineers and anyone like that needs to communicate with me, they can come up to the glass and communicate with me via hand signals. But probably the biggest piece of real estate here is display view. So that too is a screen that is inside the control room, and I'm getting the output over here, just routed through our matrix. But I'll be touching more on that setup in a little bit. Now, I'd actually like to toss to a video that we pre-recorded about how other types of roles might set up their environments. In this case, it's a Showtech on site. So let's go ahead and toss to that.
All right, so I'm in the control room, and I'm going to just kind of show you how a show tech or like a show crew member might actually have their setup with the rundown. So right here, pretty cool, fancier option. Basically, it's a screen turned vertical. And the biggest benefit of that is just going to be you get more rundown, right? You get all of these additional rows. You can really just kind of scroll up and down, have a lot more visibility of what's coming up next. And honestly, you're really not going to get much more than 2 columns in this view, probably your item column and then whatever your discrete kind of column might be. If you're a video engineer, that'd be video or audio. But you're not going to be able to see 6 columns wide. But that's sort of the things to consider when you do it. Otherwise, it's a really great option if it's a fixed position, like an audio position or a TD, someone who's got a desk, specifically. The tried and true is really just going to be some sort of a device, right? Whether that's your laptop or an iPad or a Surface, but something, generally speaking, just up and above your current position, right? So if I'm in my position here, I'm switching in studio, just being able to see ahead here and be able to see what's going on, that's kind of ideal. You could do it to the left or to the right, wherever you want to be. I personally don't like it to be very far over. I like it to be somewhere up and above and something I can always see. And that's just because at the end of the day, I like to turn tracking on and just let that thing go as long as I want. So that's just a little bit. And of course, the last option is print it out, which I think is always a good option, of course. We aren't trying to be paperless. The rundown is supposed to be something that is both like give you the benefits of real time and you can experience it all, stay up to date, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, in a show world, you really need to have good backup if you can. And so printing out a PDF, having it close by is always a suggested best practice. All right.
Thank you, Stephen, for that. And lots of great tips there. One of the things you mentioned, of course, is show caller tracking, that set it and forget it, start following the show caller and then focus on your other duties. That will be a feature that we'll be covering later on. But the view that we use most often in that setup is called display view. And we actually have another video that we want to toss to now that actually covers display view.
All right, so we're here in the control room for Showflo Studio where we actually do all of our webinars. And we built this out. It's actually just used to be a conference room, and now we've turned it into a webinar streaming studio. So we've actually got 2 monitors. On the right over here, we put Showflo Studio up, and that's kind of for everyone to be able to see the sources and program and the live stream. And then right over here, we put display view. We put the rundown in the display view sort of format. We do that because honestly, that's what we find our customers do. It's what we've led people to be doing for years, and that's what we designed this view to actually be. Is it's for large monitors in control rooms or backstage or in even like the wings of like a tunnel if you're doing sports or something like that. And it's just the ability to see only 3 or 4 rows at a time right here and nothing more. So it's not supposed to be a full-on rundown that you interact with, that you edit cells in. It's really more just a lightweight benefit for the room to be able to look up and see where we are. And what's nice is it follows along with the show caller. So if they advance from row to row, you can kind of see it will literally automatically scroll for them. If any cell edits are made or anything like that, all that comes through right there in real time. And so it doesn't mean that you wouldn't still find show crew members or producers backstage to have the rundown on their own individual like laptops or printed out, of course, in front of them. It's more just a nice to have in a control room type environment where if you're busy, you're doing a lot of things, you can look up and just see where you are in the show. So that's why display view is awesome.
Thanks again for that, Stephen. And by the way, the reason that we have those as pre-recordings is because Stephen's actually right now in that control room and directing and running this particular live broadcast. We actually do have a live shot from that room so that you can see a little bit of like what the setup is like, but I think you saw quite a bit from those videos as well. And thank you, Stephen, and of course, Darren. So let's show you now in demo mode how you might set up that display view that we were talking about. Is my screen, and this is actually the rundown that we're using for today's broadcast. So in order to access display view, you would click on the eye icon at the top right to open the appearance menu, and then of course select display view. From here, you would select the one column that you want to see visible on the right-hand side. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and stick with my production notes. And most importantly, down here at the bottom left, I get to select the show caller that I want to follow along with. The show caller, of course, is that person who is broadcasting their location in show and moving that blue bar. So how do I do that? I simply select their name from any of these, and I see that Inigo Montoya is currently broadcasting, so why not just pick Inigo Montoya? And we'll see that immediately my screen jumps to wherever Inigo Montoya is on. But of course, that is our session 2 rundown from 2 weeks ago, but you'll notice that my screen automatically updates to go to that position. And that's all I need to do. I can now leave this as an unmanned station. And if I have this feed from the display view going out to a large monitor like you saw in that behind the scenes video, then everyone in your control room can continue to work on their respective tasks, their video mixers, their audio boards, and know that when they glance up at that display view, it's going to be wherever the show caller is at the time. So let's go now and turn off this show caller tracking, and notice that I can do so by just clicking on the bright blue indicator at the bottom left, and that means that now I can scroll the screen or change views or move around. Show caller tracking is of course available in some of the other views. So let me just quickly switch over to compact view, and you'll see that it immediately goes back over to this view. And if we happen to turn it off, we'll see the name of whoever the show caller is and that passive show caller tracking mode. But let me go over now, turn this off, and move over to today's live broadcast rundown. And I'm going to show you the other side of things. I actually just remembered that I wanted to pause before jumping in too deep into show caller tracking and see if anyone has any questions. Like I mentioned earlier, we really want to make this about you, the audience, and make sure that all the information that you want to get out of this is what we provide. So Johnny, any questions thus far?
We haven't had any questions come in yet. Got a lot of people from all over the country, which is awesome. Thanks everyone for submitting where you're joining from. Just a reminder, if you have questions, feel free to submit those. We're going to be, monitoring those throughout it. Actually, we did just get one through. Let me see here. It says from Paul, does this unmanned source computer have to be logged into Showflo as a separate crew member, or can an existing crew member be logged in?
If the existing crew member is not also logged in on another device, it can be an existing crew member, but it cannot be someone that's already logged in on another device. And yes, it does need to be a Showflo user.
Yep. Yeah, and if you remember from our, if you're kind of still confused on maybe how you want to structure crew or users or any of that stuff, I'd encourage you to check out 2 weeks ago, Rundown Series 2. We cover a lot on like crew, permissions, what the best setup there. So feel free to jump back, take a look at that maybe after this webinar, and maybe some good insight there. Also got another question about any recommendations for setting up display views for remote speakers. Good question. I can kind of maybe answer that a little bit. Essentially, in order for them to be, I think there's two ways you could do this. One would be that speaker would have to be a user in Showflow. So you'd have to invite them in as crew. They'd have to log in, pull up the rundown, and then go to that display view that JP had just kind of walked us through, and then enable the show caller tracking. And from there, they're just going to sit on that page while they're presenting. Maybe they have that on an iPad or on an external monitor or something. The other way, which maybe get more complex, is you'd have to find a way to, do a screen share back to them, which, I think you can kind of make a decision there based on your event and your technical requirements. But that would be, in my opinion, the only really two ways to accomplish it if you wanted to get that back to them. So either them as a crew member or find a way to get them some sort of return feed from one of your operators or crew member that's essentially sharing their screen back to them through, whatever platform you're using.
Yeah.
And yeah, we got a couple more coming in, but let's keep moving and we'll queue up more for the next round.
Perfect. So we covered how you as a crew member might follow along with the show caller. The next side of the coin, of course, is being the show caller and how you might broadcast your location in show. Most importantly, of course, is to have the show caller permissions. Only a crew member with show caller permissions can broadcast their location in show. But to do so, all they would have to do is click on this blue bubble button that appears whenever you click on a particular element. Say right now we were in this element, I could click on that blue button there. And if we switch over to our wide shot, you'll notice that my large display is actually set up to follow along with me. So I, as the show caller, can hit the space bar and that'll move my screen and it'll also advance the screen of anyone else following along with me. Now, there are a few other keyboard shortcuts for related to show caller tracking, but spacebar to move forward and shift spacebar to move backwards will likely be the most commonly used. Now, in addition to that, you can jump out of order. So you can say we're on element 16 right now, but we want to jump all the way back to this graphic slide. We can just hover over that element and move from row 16 to row 9. And anyone else following along with you in whatever view they happen to be, they too will jump to that location. And that's a little bit of the basics regarding show caller tracking. There's also a few features associated with show caller tracking that I wanted to show you guys today. One of those features is our auto timestamping feature. And that feature is hidden behind it's just automatically hidden. But if I go over to the column edit menu by clicking on the chevron to the right of my columns, I can click on show timestamp column, and this, of course, shows me the column here. You'll notice that there's already some timestamps in here from when Inigo Montoya was moving through this show, but we've also added timestamps for whenever I have called those particular rows. Now, these can be pretty helpful, especially during rehearsals, when you're trying to get an idea for how much time you're actually going to spend on elements and refine your rundown so that it's a little bit more accurate. It can also serve as a proof of having run that particular element. So depending on your industry, you might have more use for one or the other. But this data can also be exported independently of everything else by simply coming over here to the column edit menu again, but for the timestamp column itself, and choosing that export timestamp show report. I'll just go ahead and pause and see if there are any questions regarding show caller tracking or maybe that timestamp feature before I jump into the next feature I'll be talking about, which is the over-under, which again is tied to show caller tracking. Johnny?
Yeah, got a couple. Kind of circling back a little bit to display view. I think just a good quick one I think we can answer is display view preset. And I think this is referring to those remote presenters or other people. Is the display view preset for them like by the user or by an admin or something like that, or do they have to select maybe the column that they want to follow along in addition to the item name and item numbers and stuff like that?
If the person using display view is following the show caller, then they will be following the way that the show caller has it set up. So the show caller would be choosing the column that is visible there.
Yep. Cool. And that's it for right now. So we'll kind of keep it moving.
All right. Sounds good. Well, the next feature, like I mentioned, is the over-under feature, the one that's down here. Now, the over-under is going to turn on a new clock. And once I toggle this feature on, what it does is turn on this over-under clock right here. And it turns on this little offset display, which I'll go ahead and zoom in so that you can see it a little bit better. But that offset is going to be what lets you know how heavy or light you are for that particular element. And if I were to use that keyboard shortcut I talked about earlier, which is the space bar, to advance to the very next element, you'll notice that that offset gets left behind. So I can retroactively scrub through this rundown and see where I was light and where I was heavy and by how much. Furthermore, the over-under clock that got added to the top has two functions. It will keep a running total of all of your lights and heavies, so it'll add all those deltas up, and it's going to let you know total-wise across this entire broadcast whether or not you are light or heavy. And because we did go over on this first 2-minute shot, we are over right now. But let's say I were to hit the space bar now, it's going to then subtract all of this extra time that we got from running under on this. And now that value is green. And of course, letting us know that we're under by 2 minutes and 30 seconds and that we have a little bit of pad. Now, the other function that this clock has is the ending at time. Now, this is going to continually update in the same way that this time updates, letting you know when now your show is supposed to end based on what elements you've run light on and what elements you've run heavy on. So that's a little bit about that over-under feature set. And again, you can turn that on from this toggle over here. And if, say, you used it in rehearsals and then want to use it again in day 2 of rehearsals or right before your actual live show, you can click on this reset button here to clear all of these offsets and have a fresh rundown to run through. So you can use that feature multiple times.
Yeah, just to kind of pop in a little on this one, JP, I've had a lot of calls with customers and people looking at this, and over under is, and actually see somebody in the chat who's super pumped. He says he's been asking for this feature for years. So I'm not going to tell you how long it's been in the app, Brad, but it is in there. So definitely check it out and let us know what you think. But I think an important thing, and for anyone who's looking at using this, I'd encourage you to go in ahead of time, get familiar with how it works and how the timing works. Up front, one thing that can maybe be misleading or just something good to know is that the over-under is not referencing any time of day other than, so, based on when you start the stream late or whatever, the estimated end of showtime, that's going to be reflected based on the start times that you define in the rundown, not your local time of day. So it's just an important thing. Sometimes it can trip people up. So definitely would encourage you to, just jump in, click around a little bit, go through some trials with it, just to kind of, get familiar with, what it's referencing and how you can use it. Cause I think can be extremely powerful, but it's good to know, the ins and outs.
Cool. Thank you, Johnny. And were there any questions regarding anything thus far while we're...
Yeah, we had, so one person was asking, can two people be a show caller, or how can another person take over for the initial show caller? So maybe, just talk about maybe
Yeah.
some scenarios where, multiple show callers might be helpful, but maybe what you could do and what you couldn't do.
Yeah. So yes, you can have multiple show callers. So you can have an event created where a few of your crew members have that show caller designation. Some of the scenarios in which you might have that is, say you have a few concurrent sessions. Well, of course, then you'd have a few rundowns for those different sessions, or maybe even the same rundown if it's the same thing you're running through. But you'd have a different show caller for each one because they might be on different timings. And the crews respective to each one of those sessions would follow their show caller. Now, as far as how you might have someone else take over if something happened to the show caller they were following along with, then whoever took over would have to step into that login, or you'd have to get on comms and tell all of the relevant crew members to come down over to the show caller tracking toolbar, which is this drop-down list that you see here, and select a different name. You can essentially say, hey, Marty's not calling this show anymore. Go ahead and switch over to Peter. He's got it. And they just select a different name, and immediately the system would move over to follow along with Peter as Peter progressed through the show. Hopefully that addresses that question, Johnny.
Yeah, I think it does.
All right. Any other questions or?
No, I think we keep moving. I'm queuing up a few more, so we'll circle back.
Okay, sounds good.
Keep the questions coming though, or comments or anything like that. I'm continuing to monitor those.
Perfect. Yes, and thank you, Johnny, for that. So the next thing I wanted to show you guys is another role that might use rundown in a bit of a unique way. And this is going to be anyone that's using like a voice of God setup, or someone who's like your PA announcer, right? They may not need to see all of this additional content, right? They might really just want to focus on what the element is, maybe the timing around it, and the script that they have to read. Well, we do have some views that are built specifically for that type of setup. The view I'm referring to is featured view. Now I'll just go ahead and use that appearance menu again to switch over to featured view. And just like display view, you only get to see the contents of one department column here on the right-hand side. So I'll select that column. In this case, it's my production notes, but this isn't the best rundown for me to use for this example. So let me use the quick nav and switch over to, here it is, my prompter script rundown. Here we go. And I'll wait for this to load. And it looks like the script column is already selected. So now all I need to do is select one of these rows, and it'll update the content on the right-hand side. Now the featured view can be used by someone like your announcer, and it is similar to the prompter view in that you get to see lots of text. It's meant for long form text. They can also adjust things like the size of the text, and by leveraging browser zoom, they can even adjust the size of the left and right sides of these panels. So those are cool tricks to be using there. Just like compact view, display view, and all the others, this view can too follow along with the show caller. So if I were to select a show caller to follow along with, they could be controlling what shows up here for me. Now, depending on your setup, you may want to do it that way, or you may want to allow your voice of God or prompt or PA announcer to use their own, judgment in controlling their screen. But I also mentioned prompter view, and that is another view and even feature set that really works for a very different type of role. So let me show you guys that. And I again would use the eye icon, and this time click on prompter view. And in the same way that in featured and display view, you select which columns content you want to see here, you do so in this view as well. But you do so from this right side panel, which I opened up by simply clicking on the little tab here. And when I go over to settings, I can select what column I want. Of course, script is already selected for me, so I'll leave that there. But in addition to selecting what column I want, I can also make it look a little bit different. Perhaps I prefer to read in bold and in all caps. I can just toggle those switches, and all the text that's already in those columns are just reformatted for me alone, right? I'm not reformatting all the text that already exists there. It's just how it looks to me, the prompter operator, and to the talent reading it, right? We also, of course, have horizontal mirroring. But if you are routing this to a display in a prompter rig, the display itself likely has mirroring built in. So that would be the recommendation to use that instead. And in the Styles tab, we have the ability to adjust other things like your text size. Let's say we want this just a touch bigger and space these lines out a little bit more. And I'll just go ahead and move it over to an 8 in scroll speed. And now when I'm ready, as the prompter operator in this scenario, I could just hit the space bar and that text would advance. Now, in the setup that we have in our studio, if I were to be taking this video feed and routing it into this monitor itself, then you're good to go. That's the last step in this whole chain, right? But let's say your talent is remote, or you don't have the ability to route video feeds in the way that we do in this control room. You can also use our remote prompter functionality. So at the very top, there is that little header bar that includes this button right here. It says remote prompter. And that means that it's a URL that you can enable. And once it's enabled, you can share that with your talent, and they can just open it up on their Chrome browser and see where you are as the prompter operator. And you'll notice that along with this URL, you're also specifically tying it to a prompter operator. In this case, it is tied to me. But let's say I wanted to share this link but tie it to Stephen, because I knew Stephen was going to be the prompter operator. I would simply select his name from the list and then copy this URL and send it to the presenters which will be using it. And again, that would be the equivalent of them just getting the feed coming directly out of this prompter view. So, Johnny, I think those are all the main points I want to go over today. Why don't we go into Q&A and start answering some of the questions we've got lined up?
Yeah. I think worth mentioning too on that, remote prompter feature is the ability to also use it for presenter notes, bullet points, things like that, talking points. It doesn't necessarily have to be a feature that's only used for fully scripted shows. Like as somebody had a question before in regards to like display view to a remote presenter. This could be a great option if you enable the item info where you get the element name ahead of the script or the talking points. There's can be some really unique, I think, use cases for using it outside of just fully scripted shows. Moderators, panels, grabbing questions from the audience to present to presenters, maybe different scenarios like that. So yeah. But we've got a few, got a few questions and some feedback that I can kind of grab and answer a little bit. Somebody asking about if you're able to, in the over-under, if you're able to see both the original start time and an updated time that's kind of moving with adjusted times. Not currently. There are definitely good feedback. You could use a combination of our timestamp feature, which would mean that as you're advancing through the show, we're going to actually stamp the time of day that element ran, which you could then go back maybe after the event is done, pull up the report, see what your over-under was, see what time it started at, and then kind of do that, math yourself. So that's, I guess, the only way you could accomplish something similar currently, but definitely good feedback. And, I'll be sure to kind of pass that along. And anybody who's getting in there, testing it out, or using it, or anybody maybe has used it, would love to continue to get that feedback. As it's definitely a feature we want to add more stuff to. Hopefully that answers your question, Phil. Also, let's see. Can you show us what the view is from the remote prompter URL? Did you actually open the URL on the other end?
I did not open the.
You be able to maybe just kind of follow that whole click path. And as he's getting it set up, it is basically the same look and feel. When you open it in the URL for the first time, you're actually going to be prompted with, or the presenter will be prompted with a confirmation, just basically saying, this is a remote prompter link. The operator on the other end of this is name. And then letting them know that they actually do not have the ability to scroll or make edits. That if they want to make edits to the script, they'll have to contact one of the administrators. So that URL for the remote prompter feature is a fixed position based on where the prompter operator is. So, but the look and feel of it is essentially the exact same as the prompter operator from like all that, and they do have the ability on their end to enable horizontal mirroring. So if the remote presenter has a rig at home or something where they want to use, the horizontal mirroring, they can do that setup once they get the URL. And you can send this URL out to all presenters. It's a one-to-many rather than a one-to-one. So if you have 5 presenters lined up, for a 1-hour webinar, you could send that link to all 5 presenters a week in advance, for example. And once they click into it and join, all that can be still controlled by one operator. So I think I kind of over answered that question, but I have a tendency to do that sometimes. So
yeah. So one thing I wanted to acknowledge right now is that because when I started sharing my screen into the studio, I selected a window instead of sharing the screen itself. You are unable to see currently the new window that I opened up, which has that the presenter look in it. But if I get the okay from the control room, I can go ahead and switch over. Oh, we'll just go ahead and maybe add that next.
Yeah, maybe we can get that towards the end. Have some other questions. Let's see. In prompter view, can the speed be adjusted on the fly? Absolutely. We've got keyboard shortcuts for the prompter feed. So either keyboard shortcuts, so up or down arrow basically speeds up or slows down that scroll speed, or what you're likely going to do, or if you hire a freelance prompter operator, they can actually plug in a USB like scroll wheel, contour shuttle, bind our shortcuts to that, and make it a lot more seamless and probably easier for them to do as well. So absolutely. Let's see. Any other questions coming in? Let's see. Actually, I have another good, point of feedback. Any possibility of getting private notes as an option in featured view, in addition to the department columns? Not currently in the featured view, but what you could do, which is a similar look, is actually go into your like regular rundown view and then hide the columns that you don't need to see. So, going back to last rundown series, customizable views on a per user basis. So you could keep your private notes, show the script next to it, and then hide the rest of the columns. You're not going to have the same functionality with this, scrollable text size, but another great way to kind of do it there. Yeah, so I don't see any other questions. I think we're kind of coming up as well on the time, but anything from you, JP?
Well, I went ahead and just quickly switched how I was doing a screen share, and I do have that side-by-side set up so that you guys can see what it looks like. On the left-hand side, I have my main prompter operator, and on the right-hand side, I have that URL opened up. And of course, this is the welcome message that your talent or presenter would receive. And of course, this explains to them how it all works, but you just click get started. And now this screen will match whatever is displayed by your presenter. Of course, you'll see it kind of catch up moments later. But let's say I hit spacebar from here. Then we'll see that, oh, I got the wrong tab selected. I'll hit spacebar. We'll see that both of them start moving in unison. And as far as those additional controls that Johnny mentioned, you can click on that cogwheel at the top right to turn on horizontal mirroring if that was what you wanted to turn on. And of course, turn off timers so that nothing is blocking this text.
Yeah, and the item runtime clock, that is synced with the show caller, so that can be a way to kind of use as a potentially a presenter timer. It's not going to have all of the functionality that your classic, on show site presenter timers have, but definitely could help. If you're somebody like me and you have a tendency to talk a little bit too long as a presenter. Just a little bit of an indicator of, hey, you're 5 minutes over, 2 minutes over, maybe move along or something. So other options, but you can disable it on their end.
All right.
Let's see. Can the reader arrow move? Good question.
Yeah.
Do you want to answer that, JP?
I mean, you can go ahead if you want, but the answer is yes. And I've gone ahead and done that here on my screen share, and it would move the read arrow on, of course, both the prompter operator and the screen of whoever's following along with the prompter operator.
Yep. So that is done on the operator side, just to clarify, not on the presenter side. So. Just note, as an operator, if you move that, it's moving it for any other presenter on their end. So, cool. I don't see any other questions. So I really appreciate everybody, joining today. Don't forget, if you missed any of our previous, any of these previous Rundown Bootcamp series, you can go to our website, go under the resources tab, click on Rundown Bootcamp. We've got the last two up to play back. We'll have this one up probably the next day or two. If you have an interest in taking a closer look at the software, maybe learn about pricing structures based on your organization, you can sign up for a free trial on our website, which is 14 days, comes with all of our suite of products. Or you can set up a time to talk with one of our product specialists. We can run you through the software a bit, run through the pricing structure to find something that fits, your needs. But with that, thank you so much, everybody. Have a great rest of your week. Be safe, and thanks for joining. And good to see you, JP.
Good to see you, Johnny, and thank you to the crew.
Yeah, and thanks, Stevie and Aaron. Bye, guys.